Okay, so here's a little update. Here's the transom right here. And it's got a whole bunch of holes in it because I use screws to glue two pieces of 3/4 together. Okay, so I'm going to be filling in all these screw holes with epoxy. Okay, and I also drilled, holes for the exhaust. I normally would not drill holes until common sense just tells me to drill it after I put it into the transom or after I put it into the boat, but just for various reasons I drill the holes first and I make sure I had them all lined up. Before I drilled. Okay, so I had this little piece right here. This was a little bit tricky to do, and I actually messed it up a little bit, but it's not going to matter much. I have 1.5 inch thick. I took 2 3/4 pieces of ply, and the extra ply really only cost me about 10 pounds. All right, so I figure 10 pounds is not a whole lot to sacrifice for some serious extra strength in the transom. These transoms they're not under a whole lot of stress, but I still wanted to beef it up a little bit. And the reason it's a little bit thinner here is because this little recess right here, I didn't want to, there's a little recess down in here between the outer skin and, here's the hole for the, where the jet's going to go. And then, I dug out the old plywood out of here. I really just did not want to grind too much of this out. All right, so what I'm going to do is when I put the new transom in, I'm going to bed it down in a thickened epoxy. Okay. So I'm doing a few repairs here first. I'm going to show you real quick how this goes in. See if I can set this camera up. Like I was saying, the transom was too wide. So I cut these for the seats, and it's flexible. You can pull it back, have somebody hold this while you're putting while you're slipping it in there. I would do this on a warmer day because if it's too cold, these will be brittle and they will snap. But being warm, you have a lot of flexibility. I thought I was going to have to take a whole section out. I just cut a little slit. It bends no problem. I can slip it down in. So here we go. Let me just do this. See if I can set this up just for a second here. Will this work right here? Not quite right there. Let's see if I can give it a little bit of elevation here. Not too much. Maybe this will do it. That's pretty good, isn't it? Okay, hopefully that sits right there. I'll show you how I'm going to slip this thing in here, and I'm just dry fitting it right now. I still got to put it out. I still got to waterproof it, and I still got to put some fiberglass on the outside to waterproof the transom. Take this. Here's the transom. Down in there. Go. Right back in. Bada bang, baby. Alright, this over here. Okay. So that's my idea for getting the transom in. I drilled these holes here a little bit bigger than the exhaust pipe. I'm going to put the exhaust pipe. This is through the transom exhaust pipe, okay? This has to be cleaned up too, but I'm just fitting this, okay? So I'll put this in here. Okay, now there's a lot of room. There's a lot of room around this pipe for a reason, okay? Because this is a major intrusion point for water. So after I get the transom set, I'm going to mix up some epoxy putty with the pipe in here, and I'm going to jam epoxy putty all in this opening here. And what that'll do is that'll insulate the plywood from any water intrusion. So the pipe will just be passing through epoxy and not plywood. And the way I'll get it out is I'm probably going to wrap this pipe before I put it in. I'll wrap it with plastic. The epoxy really doesn't stick to like plastic, plastic, a sheet of plastic. Or I could coat it with something. If it's smooth enough, I could coat it with some kind of oil so there's a release with the epoxy. And so what I'm basically trying to do is I'm going to pack it. I'm going to wrap this up, and then I'm going to pack with epoxy. And then when it starts to harden, I'm going to work it out. I'm going to pull it out and let it set. Because I really don't want the epoxy setting on this. I still want to be able to slip it in and out. But by having this hole bigger than I need it, I'm going to pack this with epoxy, and that'll seal the opening from that'll keep the plywood from soaking up any water. Because the exhaust pipe is submerged in water half the time. You know, especially if you have a few people, it's like halfway in. There's always water coming up on the pipe. So all these different holes I'm going to seal with epoxy. Even the holes for the jet. They're all bigger than they need to be. Now, right now, I'm going to take this back out. Take that out here. No problem with that. Because I still have work to do. So, here we go. Take this. Alright, I took it back out. Now it's on the bench. Alright, so let me get this. Alright, even it's going to be on the back, right? It's right here a minute. That's basically how it goes. Just like that. This actually seals with the gasket. I mean, after it goes on here. Okay. So you can see all the holes just line right up. Okay. Alright. And then what I do, these screws are what holds this thing on to the back of the boat. Again, what I did is I drilled these holes bigger than they needed to be. Bigger than you think. I forget what size I used, but I'm going to seal these holes with epoxy. And then I'm going to drill through the epoxy just enough to get the screw down through. And that way, all the way on the inside, even though the screws will be going through the plywood, they're really just going through the epoxy. The epoxy will be inside this hole, all around the screw. So another point of water intrusion. Okay, so I messed this hole up a little bit, but no big deal. Like I said, I'm going to build it up with epoxy. Nothing that can't be fixed with epoxy. And the reason is because I tried to get it through from both sides. I didn't have a hole saw that was deep enough, and I didn't drill it straight to begin with. So if you can get one of those guides to make a perfectly straight hole through here, it would help you a lot. But so Anyway, here's another hole. Okay, the hole's bigger than the screw. Like I said, I'm going to pack this with thickened epoxy. After it dries, I'm going to drill a hole down through there, right through the epoxy, and that way, all the way around, it's going to be insulating the plywood from any water intrusion. So even if water does get through there, it's just going to kind of come through the hole. It's not going to get to the wood because it's going to be, the screw is going to be centered in epoxy. Right. All right. The other thing are these cleats. I have the my toe cleats right here. Same thing with the toe cleats. Okay, this will give you another illustration. The toe cleats go on the outside of the boat. Okay, that's another point of water intrusion. Alright, so what I did is I drilled the hole bigger than the bolt. Alright, I'm going to pack it with epoxy, and then I'm going to drill the hole down through the epoxy after the epoxy dries, and that'll seal the plywood from any water intrusion. Alright, so that's it. I'm going to go ahead and seal this. I have to epoxy and waterproof this transom, and then I'm going to wrap it with fiberglass. And I'm having a little bit of a problem because there was a little bit of a bow in this, so make sure you get yourself some straight plywood to work with in the first place. But this was AC from the lumber yard, 3/4, one piece. You got to go do a rough cut about 5 feet. And the transom's about 57 inches wide at its widest, something like that. So, all right. Hope that helps.